Okay, welcome to Del Beccaro and Hook Enlightened Descent. My good friend Tom Del Beccaro is still on his honeymoon. He is just going all over Europe. Good for him. He'll be back next week, but I'm happy to hold down the fort while he and his beautiful bride are out and about doing their thing as they traipse around Barcelona and Naples and wherever the hell else they're going to go. But we've got a big show for you today, and we're looking forward to a couple of great guests, including my first guest. Let's bring him on right now. If you read the National File, you no doubt know who Frankie Stocks is. Frankie, hello there, man. Welcome to Del Beccaro and Hook. It's so great to see you, man. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you on. And the main reason we had you on is because you have personally been to North Carolina and you have witnessed a lot of the destruction that Hurricane Helene dealt on that state. And I'm sure some of the areas you could not access because, frankly, they don't have bridges, they don't have power, they don't have pretty much anything. But since that, and then, of course, Milton came through and adding insult to injury, no doubt. We've been hearing a constant drumbeat from the administration and from FEMA and from various news outlets that anything we're hearing about FEMA dropping the ball is misinformation, malinformation, just BS. And you're here to tell us, oh, wait a minute now, that's not BS. It is happening. FEMA really screwed the pooch on this, didn't they, Frankie?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a complete disgrace what FEMA here has done. And just to kind of tee this up, let me remind everyone that Alejandro Mayorkas came out and he admitted this himself. He said FEMA does not have any money to combat the hurricane season. We're out of money. He came out and publicly said this. It's admitted. And then when you start going back and looking through what FEMA and DHS, which sits atop FEMA, have been spending money on, you see that it's a whole lot of illegal alien trafficking and things of that nature, anything but helping the American people. So they've blown the hurricane money. They've come out and actually admitted that they've blown the hurricane money. And now they're trying to spin it around and, don't believe your lying ears. We didn't spend the money, blah, blah, blah. We never said that. It's the whole usual routine with that. But as far as the storm response goes, yeah, it's been completely disgusting. So I don't want to, I guess, mislead anyone myself about where I've been. So I haven't actually been into the areas of extreme destruction, Western North Carolina type area like that. I live in South Central, bordering on Southwest Virginia, real bad storms here. And then in the past 2 to 3 days, I drove through North Carolina down to Greensboro to the J.D. Vance Town Hall there, out to Winston-Salem in that area. And so it is true what everyone's saying, that the federal government has abandoned these people. You can see video clips. We've put some up on National File of exactly what people living there have told Kamala Harris, even to her face, that people have been left without bottles of water. And you can tell that the American people know what has happened. The American people know that that their fellow citizens have been abandoned by the feds the entire way. I was really proud, really pleased to see this, because the entire way down Route 29 in Virginia, over the state line into North Carolina, church after church, business after business, volunteer rescue squad, anything, you name it. They had big signs up, supply drive, food drive. There's a big fair going on in Winston-Salem right now, the Carolina Classic. It used to be called the Dixie Classic, which is a much better name. They were letting people in there if they brought canned food. You didn't have to pay to get in. The whole family could come if you brought canned food to give to the people who've been ravaged by this storm. So as far out as I've been is Winston-Salem, I can personally, attest to, yes, this storm ripped through not just North Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, this whole area. There were tornadoes spinning off of this thing for days. And that entire time, people were stranded. Glenn Youngkin, the governor here in Virginia, who I've got to admit, there's been things that I've been really critical of Glenn Youngkin on, but this guy, man, he has managed this storm response. It is really something. The way that he has used the state resources, he has pulled, heavily taxpayer funded emergency operations out of Northern Virginia, out of the Richmond area, sent them down to Southwest Virginia, where people were flooded out, where people were stuck in their homes, where people did lose their lives, not to the extent of North Carolina, but people in Southwest Virginia, people in East Tennessee, they did lose their lives. And, Roy Cooper, the Democrat who's been, his administration is completely infiltrated by communist China. That's something else we've reported on at National File. This guy drug his feet right along with the feds, right along with FEMA. And while he was doing that and leaving his citizens to die, Glenn Youngkin was rallying the troops and coordinating a huge response in Southwest Virginia. So he should definitely be commended on that, on top of all the election securing he's been in the news for lately.
Yeah, he has been. Well, that's the thing, Frankie. It is rather shocking. I mean, even without all of the rhetoric going around about FEMA confiscating stuff and say, well, you're not going to take it, we'll take it in, and they put it in their warehouse, and then the media and everybody saying, this is crap, this is BS, this is Trump's campaign trying to politicize this, it's a disgrace, blah, blah, blah. Trump was on the ground in North Carolina with Elon Musk dropping those Starlink setups, and I didn't hear him reporting on that much, but they sure do love to report that he's been lying about this. And as you said, who are you going to believe? You going to believe the media or your own lying eyes and ears? Because the residents in Western North Carolina, and this is for political reasons only, folks, the western part of North Carolina is the red belt of North Carolina. This is outrageous. This is a very, very strong conservative, hard scrabble, blue collar part of the state, and they got devastated. And when you listen to them talk, they will tell you flat up, and they're concerned about saving lives and saving their homes and whatnot. They're not worried about the election optics of it, if you will. And they're saying FEMA has screwed us on this. And Mayorkas is coming out now, after he had already admitted that they don't have the money, saying it's not true that any money has been funneled to the relocation of illegal immigrants. None of this money is going overseas. Well, that's just not true, is it, Frankie?
No, it's not true at all. It's a complete and total fraud. I mean, hey, just the other day, our federal government announced that $150 million was being sent to Lebanon so that they could actually go scrounge up refugees and then bring them into the United States. They want to catch people before they flee the border into Syria and scrounge them up and offer them a one-way ticket to the United States. So there's money to go around. There's money floating around all over the place, coming out of the federal government's eyeballs. They're just keeping it away from the American people, and they're using it to bring their whole demographic overhaul of the U.S. into fruition. It's completely disgusting. And really, when you get down to it, this is genocidal against Americans of all colors, all creeds. The American people, native-born American citizens, are dying here. And you're right, this is a deep red area: North Carolina, East Tennessee, Southwest Virginia into Kentucky, West Virginia. This is one of the reddest parts of this country. These are hardworking American people. These are people whose Scots-Irish ancestors came and were the first pioneers in the 1700s and opened the entire country up so that we could go west. These are real, true blue Americans, and they are being left to die.
Yeah, it's and you mentioned that that they're flying people from Lebanon in, and we know that the CB1 app is helping people fly in from the southern border, and then they're pointing to the border and saying, "Yeah, but look, there's nobody there anymore. We've solved the problem." No, you haven't. You've just diverted them onto planes and then called them legal. And I agree with you. This is what fundamental change looks like. And if a few Americans have to pay with their lives or their property, so be it. That's the way it's going to be. And then when you bitch about it and you complain about it and you point it out, they say, don't listen to these people. It's dangerous disinformation. How much of it do you think, Frankie, is disinformation?
At this point, I don't think that anything that I have heard, firsthand or through any kind of something resembling a reliable source out in the media space, as far as how bad this response has been, how little warning people had before this storm came, I don't think any of it's been disinformation. Most of the facts here have been gathered through the statements of our own federal government. Kamala Harris comes in laughing and smiling and telling the people in Georgia, we're going to give you $750 to help with home repairs, help you recover from this storm. It's a slap in the face. Alejandro Mayorkas comes right out and says, we don't have any money. And then this very same media with the next storm, they try to say that Ron DeSantis is leaving people. This very same Democrat Party with the next storm, they try to say that Ron DeSantis is leaving people to die in Florida from Hurricane Milton. And then Joe Biden himself comes out and says DeSantis is doing a heck of a job. So when I'm looking at this, I'm listening to the people on the ground who have no reason to lie. They want help. And then I'm listening to the people in our government and their corporate media apparatus, for that matter, who are coming out and saying this is disinformation. And they're all admitting in their own words that this is what's happened, that the American people have been hung out, that there is no money, not for the American people at least, and that they're going to have to deal with it themselves. You know, this is why and you know what? They're also, FEMA's telling people, don't even gather supplies. They're coming right out and saying, we don't want the supplies that all of these churches, all these fire departments are raising all over the country to send into here. They're obstructing the entire process.
Yeah, it really is sickening. You mentioned Glenn Youngkin, and you also just mentioned DeSantis there. I just watched a news conference with Ron DeSantis. Every single bridge leading into and out of Tampa Bay has been reopened. Ron DeSantis has been nothing but a leader in this situation, and God knows he's had enough practice at it. You know, I lived in Florida for a long time, and hurricanes are nothing new, but Milton, of course, dumped a bucket load of water. There's lots of wind damage and stuff. DeSantis was leading since, 48 hours before the storm. DeSantis had electrical power linemen and stuff lined up, pre-staged. It was all ready. They were ready for the storm. How much pre-staging did the federal government do inside of the Tar Heel state, North Carolina and parts of Tennessee and parts of Georgia? How much pre-staging did the feds do?
From what I understand, little to none. You know, this storm, people weren't even warned that the storm was coming until 24 hours? There wasn't even time to evacuate. You know, this just looked like it surfaced out of nowhere in the middle of the ocean. And you know, this isn't some kind of crazy talk. You can look back and look at the weather forecast. They were not coming out. You know, NOAA, the federal government that's sitting around watching every storm forming like a hawk. You know, is it really all that we've seen our government do to the American people? Is it really that far out of left field to think they slow walked even informing people of this storm so that it could overrun these areas and people could lose everything and be obstructed from voting, you know, a month later? This entire situation has been weaponized. We know that the response has been weaponized, and I think that we need to look in to the run up to the storm and see what was weaponized there, because this is a government that's actively working against its own citizenry at this point. We're seeing it every single day as the situation plays out. So to answer your question, I don't really know of any pre-staging that was done with this. People had minimal warnings. And then in that situation, you know, it really falls on the local level of people saying, hey, we've got to get out of this community. We've got to get out of this little town that's up in the mountains because it looks like we're about to get hit. But people had very little warning, if any at all. And that's why we're seeing these catastrophic results. You know, 50, maybe 60 years ago by now, there was Hurricane Camille, which killed a bunch of people in Virginia and then up into Pennsylvania. And it was very similar of how it came in with no warning. But guess what? You know, in the 60s, there weren't, 15,000 people paid by the federal government to watch the weather all the time. I mean, this is not what happens in a first world country, in supposedly the most technologically advanced country in world history. This isn't what happens. The federal government needs to be held accountable. They need to be looked at this every single step of the way. And so do governors like Roy Cooper. So certainly governors like Roy Cooper.
Yeah, it really is kind of staggering, because it's like, it seemed to me that they were more concerned, and even up until today, more concerned about the narrative and the optics of it, and trying to say, hey, wait a minute, everything you've heard is not true. You're hearing anecdotal stories. They're not true, except for they can't point to any pre-staging. They can't point to say, here's what we were doing in the run up to this storm. And you're right, little towns inside northwestern North Carolina, I mean, Chimney Rock was wiped out. It's gone. That town no longer exists. Will it come back? Probably so. It's going to be many years. They say that some people will be out without power for over a month. And now let's talk about the death count. The death count has been really kept under wraps. And that's kind of surprises me. Even the media is kind of gone quiet on this. And I've heard, again, this is anecdotal. I haven't been there, but I hear North Carolinians saying, we don't know where a lot of our friends are. They're going to be finding people for the next several weeks, they'll be pulling bodies out from under mudslides, out from underneath debris, maybe hung up in trees and stuff. I mean, this was catastrophic on a real catastrophic scale. And the feds just seem to be kind of more concerned about the narrative. Doesn't that strike you as a little bit sickening?
Oh, it's 100% sickening. They're more controlled with spinning the narrative coming out of this to cover up everything that they didn't do or everything that they deliberately slow walked or didn't do to hurt Americans than they are with helping the victims here. And the death count has been slow walked. It's up in the hundreds now. Last I checked, it was well over 200. It could have hit 300, by now, but that's just the official death count. People are reporting hundreds, if not over 1,000 people still missing. You're right, massive mudslides. There could be bodies that are never even found, and the people are just missing forever because where did they go? They're underneath the earth. The earth has been totally rearranged in some of these places. There were reports that that the force of this storm had pushed bodies and body parts that had been ripped off up into trees, and that electrical linemen and tree workers were pulling these things out. Just horrifying stories. There was a report, and this was actually mainstream news. They actually done a pretty good job with this storm coverage, News Nation. And they were reporting on a family of, I believe it was 11 people. This entire family was wiped out. They lived on a family partition on their own land. They had a few houses here and there. Every single one of them was wiped out. So the destruction from this is massive, but the loss of human life, is absolutely staggering. I think that it's pretty obvious that the death toll here is going to be way up into the hundreds, if not into the thousands. This is like the aftermath of a huge terrorist attack or something. It's really, really hideous. And they have been slow walking these death figures to make it look as, they want to minimize everything.
God, it's just so, this is, Frankie, there's a reason people hate politicians. And this is a perfect example of why. When you see this kind of garbage going on, more concerned with controlling the narrative and making sure that all the talking points are distributed to the alphabet networks and the legacy media. And then, hey, you guys carry our water. And by the way, anything you hear that you don't get from us is BS. That's just so, I can't even tell you how frustrating that must be for a North Carolinian that's living there, looking at what used to be his or her beautiful home, which is now just a slab of concrete and broken timber everywhere. Good God, and you mentioned something, and I want to touch on it. You said, look, this is affecting, and I touched on the fact this is a deep red area in North Carolina. Do you think that they're, I know this is a hypothetical, but it's one that's worth asking. Do you think they're slow walking this because they want to prevent the votes from coming in from this area of North Carolina? Is that what your gut tells you?
Absolutely, 100%. They're not even running mail in this area. They say they don't know when the Postal Service is even going to return. So, the emergency remedy, if you can't vote, if your polling place is shut down for the past 4 years, it's been beaten into our heads. Just stick the ballot in the mail, just mail it in. These people are going to have absolutely no way of casting a vote. There's not going to be functional voting facilities running. They're not going to be able to receive ballots in the mail or send ballots in the mail. All of the election chaos that we saw in 2020 is going to be playing out again in this area at an even higher, higher rate, because nobody can do anything right now. So this is an election obstruction, of election interference. What can they do besides send in the military to administer the election? That's really what what their option would be, because they've shut down the mailing. They're not going to get electricity. This is going to be a total disaster. People aren't going to have access to the polls. North Carolina is a critical state. The Kamala campaign has been really, really open and out front with, we think we need to win North Carolina. It's a must win to win the entire electoral college. So the path to the White House is going through North Carolina, much like it's been through places like Pennsylvania and Georgia and Arizona. And now there's just been chaos. This is an entire western part of the state where all of these red votes are coming in from. These are 75, 80%, 85% Republican counties. And these votes, they're needed to offset all of the Yankees and all of the liberals who've poured into Raleigh and Charlotte and all of these places. And now there's an extremely high chance that they're just not going to be able to.
Yeah. Well, I think that's going to, and as much as I hate to return this to politics, because we do have more pressing concerns there, but I think it's going to be up to the RNC to get up there and set up some emergency polling facilities, whether it's collapsible tent, whatnot. But I just got to say that is, That is that if that is true, that they're just kind of ignoring this because I'm wondering if it's going to rebound on them, and people that are heretofore kind of apolitical, maybe kind of fence sitters, call them moderates, if you will, they may get so angry about this that they turn out in waves to vote against this administration. So it may rebound against them if they don't do something to get these people an opportunity to vote. Don't you think that this could tick people off that were kind of heretofore not really paying attention?
Yeah, that's the read that I have on it right now. I think that the overall disaster response the past couple of weeks has really woken a lot of people up. I mean, there's been big headlines of like celebrity wives, NFL player wives and people like that who would normally never touch on politics, never come out and endorse Trump, coming out now and speaking out against Kamala Harris, speaking out against the Biden regime. There was a Dolphins player whose wife came out and said the Republicans are doing an amazing job responding to the storm here in Florida. Kamala is, lying. This is classic trash talk. So we are seeing a response. You can actually see it, in the mainstream press. They even have to admit to it, and you can see it and feel it on the ground. I think that this has been a wake-up call to a lot of people that we really have people sitting in Washington right now who they're not only incompetent, that's being too kind. They're malicious. They do not like the American people, and they are cheering on and assisting wherever they can in the downfall of this country and in the destruction of our way of life and of our people.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. And it's funny because what ends up happening is, now let me just tell you this, Frankie, by way, just for your information. I'm in New Jersey, and I remember full well after Superstorm Sandy hit and Obama flew in, and Governor Chris Christie at the time gave him a big hug on the boardwalk right near my house. His political career went down in flames after he did that because people were furious about the way things were being handled. But I must say that FEMA did a much better job here than they did in North Carolina. But it's still, you can't remove politics from this. And this has been an utter disaster for Democrats. And as you mentioned, Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida has done a bang-up job. You've got Glenn Youngkin, who apparently you may have some disagreements with, but he handled the storm. This storm was not handled at all. And now they're trying to handle the storm, the media storm after the storm. It's pretty pathetic.
Yeah, it is. And I think that New Jersey comparison is actually a great comparison to make here, because in that case, they weaponized a good response to the storm. And in this case, they weaponized a non-response to the storm, a deliberate non-response to the storm, in different ways. And that way it showed a Republican governor like running in and cozying up to Obama right before an election and saying, this guy came in and he saved us all. And in this case, it looks like they're trying to stop people from getting to the polls. And hopefully it's going to backfire on them. It looks like it is. So I think, you look like about a decade, 12 years apart here, I guess to be exact, and they've weaponized two different responses to the storm. So it's truly disgusting to see the lives of American people. Just they're playing games with the Americans' lives here, and with not just lives of people, but lives of entire communities. You mentioned that town Chimney Rock, totally wiped out. And there's more, there's these small rural towns just tucked away in the mountains that are totally gone, places that people have lived for generations. So it's really sad, really tragic. And it's even more disgusting when you see the feds weaponizing it against the people.
Yeah, it really is. And, and the thing is you've got one little dot of bright cobalt blue there, and that's Asheville. Asheville got devastated as well. And I would wager, now this is, I don't know what the betting odds on this are, but I would wager that a lot of those deep blue liberals that live in Asheville and the environs right around Asheville, it's a college town after all, I bet they're starting to rethink who they're going to support, because they're getting screwed over too, and basically just patted on the head and said, we're going to take care of you when Kamala gets in. I don't know that those folks at Asheville are going to buy that excuse.
Yeah, the Democrats are looking at them like collateral damage. That's where they've chosen to do all of their very few, their one Kamala appearance, and nobody showed up. And the lady that did show up told Kamala that their entire community had been abandoned. So I think that the Democrats are looking at these people in Asheville like collateral damage, and let's hope they get a rude awakening for that.
Yeah, I even saw some of the we'll call it the legacy media saying hurricane, and this just tells you where their head's at. Hurricane Helena may be Kamala's Katrina. And I'm like, well, first of all, Kamala I guess she's the vice president. She doesn't do much other than campaign. But when the media starts saying stuff like that, they are panic stricken. Do you get the sense that Democrats, notwithstanding the victims and the tragedy that befell North Carolina and parts of the South, because it's legion, but do you get the sense that the Democrats are panicking over what's happening because of the lack of preparation for this storm as far as the election goes?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's been polls that have come out in recent days that have shown Trump make these huge gains in battleground states just since these storms. So I do think this is a five-alarm fire for the Democrats. And early voting has started in a lot of states. They're really trying to churn people out before they get any more information that's going to turn them off from voting for Kamala Harris. They really want people in there pushing that button before their minds are all the way made up, because it just keeps getting worse.
Wow. Well, listen, Frankie, we got to let you go. I want to get you back. What a great conversation. And I'm glad that you're here to dispel the myth that everything that we've been talking about with FEMA, it's not BS. It is true. They completely dropped the ball. They're trying to reshape it now. But I think it's too little, too late. And a lot of people are furious. Frankie Stocks, you can find him online. Where can we find you? Why don't you tell us?
Yeah, I'm on nationalfile.com. I'm a reporter over there, and I use X extremely frequently at Real Stocks on X.
There you go. All right, Frankie Stocks, thanks for being part of the show today. We appreciate it. We hope to have you back real soon, my friend. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you again real soon, brother. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
You got it. There he goes. That's Frankie Stocks. You are listening to Del Beccaro and Hook, and maybe even watching. We'll be back with our next guest right after this. All right, welcome back to Del Beccaro and Hook Enlightened Descent. Once again, I will be doing this. We'll be flying solo, just like we did in the first segment. We're very happy to be back for segment 2 with our first time on the show, and just thrilled to have him, Todd Bensman. Todd, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you are an expert in all things what's going on our southern border, international security and whatnot. And our southern border has been a disaster for a long time. Last year, at the beginning of last year, you put out your book, Overrun. Boy, howdy, Todd, how true that book ended up being. Talking about prescient, you were right on top of it. And now you've got a big trip planned down to Mexico. Why don't you fill us in on what you expect to cover or to discover and what you've already discovered?
Sure. Well, by now you're probably hearing the Harris campaign talking often as it can, about how the numbers of illegal crossings are way down, that they're down to sort of the Trump era numbers, which were incredibly good. Although historically they're still kind of up there. And that's true. The numbers of illegal crossers are down, and they have been down a lot since December. The reason, though, why they're down is because the Biden-Harris administration waved a magic wand, went down to Mexico and cut a deal with the Mexicans, just like Donald Trump did when he was president, and said, we need you to shut this down until November 5th, because it looks terrible for us to have these thousands and thousands, 10, 14,000 a day, just pouring over the border while I'm trying to campaign. At that time, it was Biden trying to campaign. Now it's Harris. And so the Obrador administration launched 35,000 troops and did a major military campaign that continues to this day, where they have been sweeping the northern borders clear of immigrants. putting them on planes and buses and shipping them all the way down to Chiapas State, Mexico, Tapachula in particular, which is the town I'm going to, and holding them back behind a wall of militarized roadblocks so that they don't have the optics up here anymore and they can keep saying, well, we got the border under control. What's the big deal? What border crisis? So I thought that it would be interesting to go down to Tapachula and get in the middle of it and see what's really going on down there. There's no American reporter in 8 months has done this. Amazingly, I'll be the only one ever to go there to actually see this Gaza Strip that they've built down there for the American election. And the big questions that I'll be asking will be, for example, are you guys going to be allowed to move forward after November 5th?
Yeah.
What are the Mexicans doing to actually hold them back? And recently, like a few days ago, a caravan of 3,000 left the Gaza Strip down there under they have a new president. Mexico has a brand new president. And instead of breaking them up, they were actually escorted by Mexican troops north, which is a brand new thing. So are they going to be doing these escorted caravans north? There's a whole lot of questions here about that directly affect our border after November 5.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the reason I'm going down there. I leave Monday, and you can follow my work down there. I'll be there for maybe a week.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, Todd, because we've all noticed that the border is not being inundated as it was. But is this a case of kind of closing the barn door after the horses have run free? I mean, go to any city USA and they're dealing with this migrant problem. And even if they do say, okay, we're going to keep this in play, even November 6th, we're keeping it in play, which I doubt, but let's just say they do. Is it too late? Is it too late? I mean,
it's too late. 10 million people got in. I mean,
and that's probably lowballing it.
That's probably lowballing it. That's what we do at the Center for Immigration Studies. We go with what we know. But we also recognize that there are probably many more than that have been allowed into the country or who got into the country one way or another. But in addition to the US induced Mexican crackdown that's been going on since December of 2023, very effectively, a page right out of Trump's playbook. Trump was the one who invented that.
Yeah.
The Biden-Harris administration is doing some other sleight of hands to keep the numbers looking like they're in control down there. One of those is the CBP-1 phone app, which allows hundreds and hundreds of thousands of intending border crossers to schedule their illegal crossings over a land bridge, over the port of entry, or to fly in from a foreign airport directly into U.S. airports. 650,000 have been authorized to fly from foreign countries right into U.S. airports, 45 of them. And another 500,000 have been walked right over the land ports of entry from Mexico with these scheduled appointments. So they supposedly are permitted. But if you're Denver, Boston, Chicago, you don't care how they're getting in or whether they're being counted as illegal or they're coming in with their hands out one way or another. And Harris has said publicly over and over again that she's going to treble down on those programs. So they're coming in huge numbers, 40, 80,000 a month together between the land ports and the flights program alone. That's not including all the ones that are down in Mexico trapped in the Gaza Strip there that I think on November 5th, they're going to release them or let them caravan out slowly so that nobody notices. So the numbers are probably going to go way back up if Harris is elected.
Yeah. Well, I remember hearing all about the CBP-1 app during the vice presidential debate. J.D. Vance talked about it. Boy, it was
To shut them off. They
Yeah,
turned
the moderators shut him down quickly because they didn't want that. They didn't want that to get out. But
no.
what you're explaining here is, and we've seen this because I've heard anecdotal evidence of people in airports flying saying this is kind of strange. We just saw an entire plane full of illegals land, and in large part, correct me if I'm wrong here, Todd, but in large part, these illegals have no. There's no vetting done. They don't have ID, state official ID. We do know on the southern border, if you walk 10 feet on to the south of our northern of our borders, their northern border, you see all kinds of IDs and stuff just thrown on the ground. They want to get rid of that stuff. What's going on with the vetting process of this CBP one app? Is there any vetting going on, or is it all just a smokescreen?
Well, there is the appearance of vetting going on, but it's not actually vetting. Well, what they do is, if you're doing CBP1 or just crossing the border, they'll take your fingerprints and your facial recognition photo and run it against databases. But they're mostly US databases. So if you've never been in the country to commit a crime before, you're going to show all clear.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's a joke, and that they're saying, this is robust. Don't worry, this is robust vetting that we're doing. Everybody's getting vetted, but if you throw a ball up against a wall that's not there, the ball's going to just keep going. I mean, there's
Yeah.
nothing to
Yeah.
knock off against. And the same goes for people coming from all of these 180 different countries around the world, many of whom don't have criminal databases at all. Somalia, Syria, or they would never participate in an intelligence sharing situation with us. Like Venezuela hates us, Cuba doesn't cooperate with us, Haiti doesn't even have computers. I mean, most of the people that are coming in, even if we wanted to try to do a criminal check on them in their home countries, we can't do it.
Yeah.
Iran, we've had 900 Iranians cross over. China, we've had 60,000 Chinese cross. You think the Chinese are going to tell us that they want their criminals to come in here? So,
Yeah.
not much
Yeah.
vetting going on. I'm sorry, no matter what
Yeah.
they.
Well, that's just it. I mean, President Trump, former and hopefully future President Trump, has stated many times on the campaign trail that they're emptying out their prisons, they're emptying out their mental institutions, and that sounds a little hyperbolic. But then you look at the crime rates in Caracas have dropped like 85%. It's like, well, wait a minute, maybe there's something to this, especially when you hear stories of Venezuela gangs, Tren de la Agua, whatever the hell the name. I can't say the name, and I don't even pretend to know it. But I do know about the gang. MS-13, of course, is another. So there is no vetting going on. This is an unholy alliance between the Democratic Party and the media and big tech, really, isn't it?
I have to say that I'm a journalist of 23 years. I mean, that's my first big career, and I did it for a long time, decades. And from what I'm seeing, I I I firmly believe that the U.S. media, the legacy media in particular, is running protection for the Biden-Harris administration and for the campaigns. There should be no reason why Todd Bensman, who doesn't even work as a journalist, I'm with the Center for Immigration Studies, will be the only American ever to go to this Gaza Strip down there along the border and the Mexican Guatemala border, where this momentous story is taking place, this incredible human drama that is the result of a U.S. policy. Why am I the only guy
Yeah,
going
good
down
point.
there? It's crazy. And furthermore, I've just returned from Colombia and Panama, where the brand new Panamanian president promised he was going to close this massive migration passage through his territory.
That's the Darien Gap, I think, that you're
Darien
talking about.
Gap.
Yeah.
And the Biden administration promised to support the Panamanian government, and the Colombian government promised to support But when I went down there, there wasn't a single other reporter from anywhere that I ever saw anywhere. And that's like the biggest migration story there is.
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, why am I, first of all, I'm happy to be the only guy down there in a way. But it's also bad for the country. I mean, it shouldn't be me going down there alone.
Yeah, here. I don't disagree with you at all. What? Let me ask you this, because you're going to Tapachula, where you refer to it as the Gaza Strip. Obviously, folks, it's not the Gaza Strip, but it is put together like the Gaza Strip. They've got these people fenced in, hemmed in with roadblocks, probably razor wire and whatnot. They're basically just keeping them in this temporary encampment. Now you're going to go down there, and I wager you probably will be the only reporter that they've ever seen down there. What do you think the American people should know that they probably don't know that Todd Bensman does know?
Well, for one thing, most Americans have no idea that the reason the border numbers are down is because the Biden-Harris administration somehow got the Mexicans to do this incredibly aggressive, brutal operation. I mean, it's brutal. They're beating them up. They're, you know, forcing them onto planes and buses. They're hauling them off of freight trains. It's force. And what they're doing down there is hemming them up. Now, I don't mind that they're hemming them up. I liked it when Trump did it. I went to Tapachula when Trump did it to assess what was happening there. But the big question is, how are the Mexicans holding them down there? Who are they letting through? Under what circumstances are they letting them through? And what is the plan after November 5? Those immigrants that are down there trapped with more coming every day through the Darien Gap since they couldn't get it closed, piling up in there, it's creating undoubtedly a domestic political problem for the Mexicans. So they have to let them go. They can't just keep holding them there indefinitely. It's too big of a problem,
Yeah.
an expensive problem. And so are we going to see an onslaught of just tens of thousands one day, like on November 6th? I think is a big question to answer. And if not, how are they going to do it? They got to get rid of them. They got to let them go.
Yeah. Well, and that's November 6th. Could you just imagine? It's like, okay, well, the floodgates are open again. And that's, you know, that's provided Kamala Harris wins. And things aren't looking good on that front for her. Of course,
Actually, even if Trump wins, I can see the Mexicans saying, well, game over. We don't need to do this anymore. The election's over. We were just
yeah,
doing it for the election. So, you know, there's 60 days transition between the current administration and maybe a Trump administration, and that's their one shot to bolt and get over the border before Trump gets in there and closes that thing down, and he will. So I think that there'll be an onslaught, maybe either way.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So, in other words, so the November 6th election, we find out, let's just say hypothetically, Trump wins. Well, then the Mexican government looks at that and says, okay, we've got a window until January 21st.
Yes. We're off the
And
hook.
yeah, we're off the hook. We're no longer holding these people for optics, quote unquote, air quotes. We're going to let them go because, frankly, it's not just the optics that are bad for us. It's costing us a lot of damn money, and
Yeah.
it's a pain in the ass, and we're letting them go, and they're
Yes.
coming your way. Now, Trump has promised, Todd, that not only is he going to seal that border up tighter than a drum, but he's going to start with mass deportations. What is your take on that? Do you think that is feasible? And I mean, because he's getting a lot of support for that. A lot of people are cheering him on, saying, "Hell's yes, do this," because it's affecting us. I mean, we can talk all about what happened in North Carolina and with the storm and where this money, and they're saying it's misinformation and malinformation.
Not misinformation, but go ahead.
No, well, that's my point, is that this one of the worst words in politics is optics, because it means that you want people to see things not as they are, but as you want them to be seen. And I just find the whole thing sickening. And I think the American people are starting to wake up for that. The sands are beginning to shift a little bit, maybe there. Do you think Trump is going to be able to do this mass deportation?
Well, remember that compared to what what they're doing now for deportation, it will be a multi-hundred percentage point increase, which isn't hard to do because the Biden-Harris administration on the very first day put in place a virtual moratorium on interior deportations. I'm not talking about the pandemic Title 42 pushbacks. I'm talking about from the interior of the country. They put 100% moratorium on deportations. Courts, kicked that out, but then they came back and found this other way to reduce interior deportations by 80%. So we have the infrastructure to increase it at least back to what it was,
Yeah.
80% more than that. And then I think that, it'll be a target-rich environment. They'll have to expand the bed space, the ICE corps that goes out and does that work. It won't take them long to do that. And I do think that they will vastly increase the number of completely lawful deportations. There's like 1.9 million, almost 2 million people who have lawful removal orders on them that are just running around that
I'll
they
be
just
damned.
pick up. So just go pick them up.
Yeah.
So they're going to have their hands full of criminal aliens first. But then they're going to have a whole lot more that have run out all their appeals with everything, and now they're just sitting around living here because nobody will deport them.
I'll be damned. Todd, I think what we're living through right now is the end result of fundamental change. This is it, a fundamental change. We were promised that with Barack Obama. We're going to fundamentally change America. And by God, they've done a hell of a job of it, haven't they? They've fundamentally changed New York City. They've fundamentally changed Denver. They've fundamentally changed communities all over the country, and people are sick of it. I suspect it's going to come back and bite them in the ass on November 5th, but we'll find out. Let me ask you this, because we got to wrap, and I know you're a busy man. You're about to hot foot it down to Mexico. Where can we follow your work? We want to get you back when you come back to get the dope, but where can our viewers and listeners follow you, Todd?
Sure. Well, I work for the Center for Immigration Studies, so CIS.org. You can just go to that site and look me up. We'll have my material prominently displayed. But the other place you can go is toddbensman.com. That's my personal website, and there you can sign on to my newsletter free, and find all my social media there, and just like click on it. And I have Getter, I have Truth Social, X, LinkedIn, and a YouTube channel even. So you can just find all that stuff right there on my website.
Okay, well, Todd Bensman, listen, man, thank you so much for giving us some time today. It's shocking. It's shocking that you're doing that you're having to do this, quite frankly. But by God, we're happy that you are. I hope that we can get you back on the show when my buddy Tom gets back, and also when you get back from Tapachula. Todd Bensman, be very, very safe, and thank you for giving us some time today, man. You have a good one.
All right. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay, you take care. This has been Del Beccaro and Hook. Until next week, goodbye.